Universal Casualty, Super Q,
los Miami Dolphins y tú, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Son los Dolphins, nuestros Miami Dolphins, el team número 1 en toda la nación. Y son ellos orgullo de Miami y de todos los latinos en la capital del sol. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Este año no me hablen de los Redskins, no me hablen de los Chargers, ni de los Dallas Cowboys, porque los Dolphins son número 1 y lo demostrarán al llegar al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Nuestra línea está mejor que nunca y nuestra defensiva fue siempre la mejor. Y es por eso que yo no tengo duda que los Miami Dolphins ganarán el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl.
Universal Casualty
Y Super Q, los primeros. Bueno, caballeros, todo el mundo que cante con nosotros. Dame una D, dame una O, dame una L, dame una P, una H, una I, una N, una S. ¿Qué es lo que tenemos? Miami Dolphins. Me voy para el Super Bowl. 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 Me voy para el Super Bowl.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
There's a team Dolphin fans. Football is mighty rough. Winning gets awful tough. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins.
Hello, Miami Dolphin fans, and welcome to the Same Old Dolphin Show, part of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. I'm Josh Katzker. With me today and every day is my brother from the exact same mother, Aaron the Brain. Aaron, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
How's it going, Brain? We're back.
It's going good. It feels good to be back. I'm sure we're going to stumble more than a couple of times because got to get the rust shaken off a little bit, but it feels good.
It's good to come back and do an episode, shake the rust off just in time to go back into hibernation for the summer months. And then we will come back and then we'll be, doing our thing. So very exciting time. Of course, the Dolphins have been busy. The Dolphins have been busy since we've been away. Of course, the 2023 draft took place. Then the NFL, the kings of stretching things out, did a 3-hour TV special to announce the schedule for 2023. So that's a lot of fun. And then on top of all of that, the Dolphins have now signed a couple of offensive linemen, and we're going to be talking about it here on today's show. But, we could do a deep dive into the draft, Brain. We talked about it. We could do that. But, it's kind of old news. So I've got a different idea for how we're going to start the show today. But before I do that, I want to remind everybody, if you're not doing so already, you should be following us on social media, because even though the Dolphins aren't super busy and aren't going to be super busy over the next few months, we're still going to have stuff to say. You're going to read my tweets about the Chicago Cubs. So, and we're going to read my tweets about the Miami Heat. We're in the Eastern Conference Final for the third time in 4 years. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Wow. Cheers to that. L'chaim. Also, shout out to the Florida Panthers in the Eastern Conference Final in the National Hockey League, which is very exciting as well. So lots of good stuff going on there. But a reminder to make sure you're following us. I'm at Amplify to Rock. He's at Aaron the Brain. That's at Aaron the Brain. The show is at Same Old Dolphins. Download, rate, review, and subscribe to the Same Old Dolphin Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere you get your podcasts. And make sure you are subscribed to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. If you're watching live on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel right now, shout out, what's up? Hello, how are you? If you're watching it after the fact, hello, how are you? Smash the like button, please. Do us a favor. Share, like, and subscribe. We appreciate it very much. If you're listening in podcast form after the fact, we appreciate you as well. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you being part of the family here. And of course, make sure you're visiting DolphinsTalk.com each and every day. It is your one-stop shop for all things Miami Dolphins. Brain, with all that out of the way, it's time.
Can we check your pulse if you're not fired up?
That's right. It is time for another Miami Dolphins pulse check, because it's been a while since we had a new episode of the show. We're back for the attack. And so, Brain, it's time for us to talk about how you're feeling. If you're watching live in the chat, go ahead and give us one word that describes how you feel about your Miami Dolphins right now. Tell it to us in one word. Leave it in the chat, leave it in the comments, tweet at us at Same Old Dolphins, leave it in the comments on this video. We want to hear what your thoughts are. Brain, I want you to tell us right now, what is your one word to describe how you are feeling about the Miami Dolphins right now?
So, obviously, big year. We're going in with expectations. We made the playoffs last year. We almost stole a game in spite of having to start it with Skylar Thompson in Buffalo. We made the big change at defensive coordinator, probably the biggest thing that the Dolphins have done this offseason, bringing in Vic Fangio to replace Josh Boyer. Then you go out, you bring in Jalen Ramsey, you bring in David Long. You're making these changes on the defensive side of the ball while at the same time largely keeping all of your important players on the defensive side of the ball. So there's been a lot of emphasis on beefing up the defense because the defense was subpar last year. And it wasn't just bringing in a new coach, but they made some significant moves in player personnel to really fix that side of the ball. Now, when we did our show after the Super Bowl and kind of a preview of what the Dolphins were going to do in the offseason and, what we wanted them to do, I had kind of a, I said at the time there were several different ways that they could attack it, but where I really landed was just look at the Super Bowl. Philadelphia, one of the best defensive teams, arguably the best defensive team in the league last year, and they still couldn't stop the Chiefs. And the Chiefs, played some defense throughout the year, but they couldn't really stop Philadelphia. At the end of the day, this league is an offensive league, and it has been that way for quite some time. And once every few years, there's a team that makes it to the Super Bowl built on defense. But generally speaking, in this league, you win with offense these days. And so my thought was, you don't want to ignore the defensive side of the ball, but we've got glaring holes on the offensive side. And so my thought was, if we could just fix the offensive line, I'd feel really, really good about this offense. And then we'd focus on the defense. I mean, look at the Super Bowl. Those two teams that played, Philadelphia and Kansas City, two of the best offensive lines in the league. Now, that said, I get what the Dolphins are doing. I get what they did with going out to get Jalen Ramsey. Look, elite player. You get him for a third-round pick and Hunter Long. He takes a pay cut. Hard to hate it. You bring in an upgrade at linebacker. Don't dislike that. You bring in a pass rusher. You keep another pass rusher. You don't jettison Emmanuel Ogbuehi. I get it. But we waited and we waited for the, what are they going to do on the offensive side of the ball? I mean, they brought in a backup quarterback in Mike White, brought in Chosen Anderson, Braxton Berrios.
I believe his name is now Robbie Chosen.
Robbie Chosen. So did he drop the Anderson? Or it's Robbie Chosen Anderson?
Dude, we could do a whole documentary podcast series on what that dude's name is right now.
But I know it's a long buildup to get there. I understand what the Dolphins are doing. It makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. But I'm skeptical.
Oh.
I'm skeptical that this is going to work.
This is what I just really want to first. This is on brand here. This is good. I like that we've been away for a little while, observing some things, and we come back and you're like on brand. You are delivering. This is what the people want. Tweet at Aaron the Brain is the handle. Tweet at him, folks. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, give me your hate, but I mean, for the last however long I've been skeptical or pessimistic, I've been right about this team. So I'm skeptical that this can work because at the end of the day, you've made very mild adjustments to the offensive side of the ball. And we'll talk about Isaiah Wynn. They signed this other offensive lineman that
Cedric Ogbuehi.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that one until like 10 minutes before the show. And you told me, and I really don't know much about it.
Listen, if there's anything we need, it's more Cedrics.
But
sign Cedric Ceballos while we're at it.
Oh, famous slam dunk champion Cedric Ceballos and former Heat player Cedric Ceballos. He played for the Heat for like a year, I think.
Didn't he? For a minute? He had a little cup of coffee with the Heat. Anyway, I digress. Continue. You're skeptical.
Should I do the rest of this with a blindfold on in honor of Cedric Ceballos?
Well, no, that would be off-brand for you to be blindfolded.
Touche. But at the end of the day, as much as people got on the defense last year, and the defense had its problems, Josh Boyer had to go, and I'm all for bringing in Vic Fangio, and it was good. There were needs that needed to be addressed on that side of the ball. When this team got to the playoffs last year, they largely did it on the back of the defense down the stretch, and it was the offense that was falling short. And to have that happen and to go into this year and still feel like you have to go in banking on Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg as starters on your offensive line, I'm skeptical that could work. I understand you don't want to necessarily give up on your former first round pick, and he's going to go into a contract year. And if you just put him on the bench, then you're just giving up on him, and you don't want to spend a bunch of money and overpay on a tackle in a high price tackle market.
You don't have a bunch of money.
Well, yeah, but you could have.
Yeah,
and you did have.
Yes.
And where you elected to spend that money,
and
you elected to not free up money, was very telling at the time. And they let the market dry up because at the end of the day, as Chris Greer said, we think you guys are probably a little bit more concerned about that position than we are. And I'm skeptical that outlook is the smart way to approach it. That said, I'm open to being proven wrong, but I've trained myself to approach this team with a healthy bit of skepticism, and this offseason has done nothing to change that.
Yeah, well, I share your skepticism. I also share your specticism. Is that for that matter? I get it. I saw somebody on Twitter saying something like, "You got to learn to be patient with this team," and I'm like, no. I have done patience with this team. I have done patience with this general manager. It is now put up or shut up time. And we're going to get into the schedule in just a minute, but it's safe to say that there are expectations on this team now, right? And so with all that said, I share your skepticism. I understand. I appreciate it. I've been around this team far too long to not have at least a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to the Miami Dolphins, particularly in the middle of the summer when some people, and listen, I'm not going to blame somebody for having their head in the clouds about the Miami Dolphins right now, because this is traditionally the time of the year where it's the most fun to be a Dolphins fan, because they have not brought us crashing back down to earth with the reality of the situation yet. This is the opportunity to go and have your Super Bowl dreams, and it's wonderful and it's great. And I appreciate it. And part of me is there with you right now, because I also believe that that this team is capable of accomplishing great things, right? But again, as I said before, I share your skepticism. So with that in mind, my pulse check for this Miami Dolphins team right now, I am intrigued. Because I think the upgrades that have been made on the defensive side of the ball, with bringing in Vic Fangio, bringing in Jalen Ramsey, all of the upgrades that they have made, I am really excited to see what this defensive unit does, particularly given the very tough schedule that the Dolphins have in front of them this year. The Dolphins, in their division, the Dolphins are going to have to defeat a team led by Josh Allen. They're going to need to defeat a team led by Aaron Rodgers. They're also going to need to defeat the New England Patriots. And so that's intriguing to see what that defense is going to do. But again, I would share your opinion that offensive line is the area that this team really needed to address in this offseason. And they have not really, in any kind of significant way, done that. With bringing in Cedric Ogbuehi, by bringing in Isaiah Wynn, look, I'll say this. It is unquestionably a good thing that Chris Greer has gone out and signed offensive linemen and brought in at least something. I mean, you can put the word competition in quotes for Liam Eichenberg and Austin Jackson, or you can call it legitimate competition, whatever you want to do. It is a good thing that Chris Greer went out and brought these guys in. I'm not crazy about either guy, but if the way that I look at it is we are looking at these moves as very low risk, potentially high reward, especially with Wynn, right? He's a high draft pick. Ogbuehi, I believe, is a high draft pick too, originally. So these were guys that had high expectations in their career. And so they are guys that if they come good, could absolutely be better than what the Dolphins currently have in Liam Eichenberg and Austin Jackson, right? They could potentially beat. Now, and you've got both of them have a little bit of flexibility in their ability to move left to right. Ogbuehi, I believe, also has the ability to play guard, which is helpful as well. So there's some positional flexibility there. For whatever reason, they decided they don't want to bring Brandon Shell back, even though he looked decent last year. They're moving on. You've got these two guys. Either way, it's a good thing that they brought these guys in. Are these the kind of guys that you really wanted the Dolphins to bring in to upgrade this offensive line? Well, no, but it's clear that this regime is not willing to invest any more kind of big money on that offensive line. They are buying in to the guys they paid money for last year in Teron Armstead, Connor Williams, and the guys that they invested draft capital in Eichenberg, Hunt, and Austin Jackson, and they are going with them. And that is the gamble that they are going with. And Chris Greer went out there on a limb and he said, you guys worry about this position a little bit more than I do. And quite frankly, that has the potential to be written on his tombstone if this offensive line proves to play a significant part in this team falling short of expectations this season. So I'm intrigued by what the Dolphins are doing. I'm still feeling optimistic. I still feel like there are good things ahead for this team. But that offensive line remains a question mark. Obviously, still a long way to go before we get to the end of the season, but it is what it is, and this is how I feel on May 15th as we're recording live here as we prepare to enter the doldrums of summer in the National Football League. So, Brent, the Dolphins also drafted some players. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the draft because it was it was a long time ago, but they drafted in the second round, pick 51, Cam Smith, a cornerback from South Carolina. Pick 84 in the third round, they picked Devon Achane, a running back from Texas A&M. And then they didn't pick again until round 6, where they used pick 197 on Elijah Higgins, a wide receiver / tight end from Stanford. It sounds like the Dolphins are planning to use him primarily as a tight end. And then in round 7, they picked Ryan Hayes, an offensive tackle from Michigan. It sounds like nobody feels too strongly about Ryan Hayes being an answer for this team. It sounds like at most he's going to be, a depth piece for the Dolphins. And it sounds like he's going to be a little bit of a long-term project, which when you draft an offensive tackle in the 7th round, that's basically what you're picking up at that point. So they've got these guys. Again, I think Achane has the potential to be a nice supplementary piece for the Dolphins. He's small, he's fast, he can catch the ball. So you can see how he factors into plans here. That probably signals the end of Myles Gaskin's time on the 53-man roster for the Miami Dolphins. And then you've got this pick, Cam Smith, which again, I think is supporting this defensive image that Vic Fangio has for this team. And I think, an interesting pick. I know that there was, at the time, a lot of people had disagreement as to whether or not this was the best, not just cornerback on the market, but just defensive back that was available at the time. But he was brought in, and I think of the guys that the Dolphins signed, he has the potential, I think, to be the biggest contributor this season for the Miami Dolphins, Brain?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Cam Smith pick is that, and I wasn't a fan of the pick, and I think it's just another example of the Dolphins winning this offseason. And I feel like there's no, we're not going to know this, but it feels like part of the deal with getting Vic Fangio was basically Chris Greer saying, hey, Vic, we're going to get you whatever you want here in year one. And that's why the offensive line and the offense in general kind of ended up on the back burner. That's what I feel. That's just a guess. But as somebody looking from the outside, I read between the lines, and that's kind of what I feel. And the Cam Smith pick has a lot of potential to really make this defense elite. But let's be honest, like, if you're going to go at it in a year where you're supposed to be all in and you're supposed to be contending for a championship, and you've got the same question marks on the offensive line that you've had for like a decade, your defense better be elite. Like, this defense cannot just be a pretty good defense, because if it's only a pretty good defense, then the offense needs to be absolutely elite. And there's too many question marks on that side of the ball. And I don't want to get into those yet. Aside from just offensive line, because we could do a whole other show on other offensive question marks for this team. But the Cam Smith pick has a lot of potential. Can he be one of the 5 best defensive backs on this roster this season? Because if he is, then he's going to play a lot, and he's going to have a positive impact on this defense. So the question is, where does he fit in that hierarchy? Because you've got Jalen Ramsey, and you've got Xavier Howard, and then you have Javon Holland. The other safety position is a little bit of a question mark. It's a little murky. Brandon Jones coming off of is an ACL or an Achilles? I don't remember. But a season-ending injury. So you're not sure if he's going to be ready for the start of the regular season. You're not sure if he's going to be full strength, what he's going to look like when the regular season rolls around. You went out and you signed Deshaun Elliott. Can he be in that Brandon Jones role? Maybe. But I would assume, since that's a strong safety that we're talking about, even if your thought is that you can move Jalen Ramsey to safety at some points in the game, which has been teased and I think is not at all out of the realm of possibility. You know that Jalen Ramsey's not going to play strong safety, and Javon Holland really isn't a box safety either at his best. So Cam Smith is not going to play that role. He's not going to fix that position. The question is he better than Kader Kohou and Nick Needham this year? And if he is, then he's going to get a lot of playing time, and he's going to make that room a lot, he's going to make that room better. And that's going to definitely be a huge help for this defense taking the next step. But this defense better be elite, because there were guys there on the offensive side of the ball that would have helped out in positions that you were weaker. They valued that position for whatever the reason. So hopefully Cam Smith is one of this team's 5 best defensive backs. If he's not better than Kader Kohou or Nick Needham, it's a pretty bad sign.
Yeah. So again, intrigued. But let's shift our focus now to the Miami Dolphins 2023 schedule, because this is the other thing that's been talked about a lot in recent days, is this Miami Dolphins schedule, which, if you're watching live on the YouTube, we've got scrolling down at the bottom of the screen. If not, well, we're about to talk about it right now. I'm going to real quick go over the schedule, which I'm sure most people know now what's happening. But here we go. Week 1 at the Chargers. Week 2 at the Patriots. Tough opening. Week 3 at home versus the Denver Broncos. Week 4 at Buffalo. So in Buffalo in October, beginning of October. So probably avoiding the weather in that situation. Week 5 at home against the Giants. Week 6 at home against the Panthers. Week 7 at Philadelphia on Sunday Night Football. Week 8 at home against the New England Patriots. Week 9 in Germany against the Kansas City Chiefs, 9:30 a.m. NFL Network. Das ist gut. Week 10, a bye week for the Miami Dolphins right in the middle of the season. Week 11, at home against the Raiders. Week 12, at the Jets. Week 13, at Washington. Week 14, back home against Ryan Tannehill or potentially Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans. Week 15, at home versus the Jets. Week 16, at home versus the Cowboys. Week 17, at Baltimore. New Year's Eve in Baltimore. Interesting. And finally, week 18 at home, closing the regular season against the Buffalo Bills. Pretty good. That is five nationally televised games for the Miami Dolphins. The 3 primetime games, 2 Sunday Night Football appearances, 1 appearance on Monday Night Football, a Germany game at 9:30 in the morning, and a Black Friday game, the first ever Black Friday game in the history of the NFL. Brain, an interesting schedule for the Miami Dolphins, a tough schedule for the Miami Dolphins. Any initial thoughts for you in seeing that schedule that was released last week?
I mean, the first thing that jumps out is, starting the season on the road against the Chargers, in a game that, last year when you went to LA, it was a huge game and you got thoroughly outplayed. So coming right out of the gate and playing that team, both teams having new coordinators, having that relative, unknown that you have when you're playing in the first week of the season. That's a really big week 1 matchup. That one's really intriguing. Obviously, to me, the biggest story is the fact that we're playing an international game and we didn't give up a home game for it. So that's a huge win, because it seems like every year that the Dolphins have played one of these international games, and it's always been in England, it's always been a designated home game. So we've always lost a home game, but you're getting basically losing a road game because it's a neutral site, and that road game is against a team that has one of the best home field advantages in the league and is the defending Super Bowl champs. So I think that's a huge win. Granted, I'm not necessarily going to pick Miami to win that game, but I feel better about playing that game in Germany than I do in Arrowhead. So I think that's huge. And then the other part of it is that when I look at 4 of the last 5 games of the season being at home and really only having 1 cold weather game, and it's at Baltimore, which that could be a lot worse. I feel pretty good about this schedule. I think it's a very navigable schedule. Yeah, it's not an easy schedule, but nobody really knows. I mean,
yeah, that's the key, right?
The thing about going over strength of schedule, it's all based on last year's records, but a lot of these teams aren't going to be as good as they were last year.
Yeah. When people talk about the strength of the Dolphins schedule, one of the things that they're talking about is that they are banking on the Jets and Aaron Rodgers being a significantly better team than they were last year. And while they very well may, they also could be a disaster. So that's a possibility. You've got the Denver Broncos, which, everybody wants to think, Russell Wilson is going to be better this season. I don't know that that's true necessarily. You've got the Chargers, who remain a mystery, particularly in week 1 in the season. You've got the New York Giants, again, a mystery. The Carolina Panthers, a mystery, a team that people expect to be better, but you never really know. The Philadelphia Eagles, yes, I expect them to be very good. The Kansas City Chiefs, I expect them to be very good. The Raiders, who knows? The Commanders, who knows? Probably not great. The Tennessee Titans, potentially my sleeper pick for worst team in the NFL this year coming up.
That's wow.
Sleeper pick has the possibility of the bottom completely falling out on the Tennessee Titans, and then the Dallas Cowboys, who are also a mystery, so yes, is it a tough schedule? Absolutely. But here's the other thing. It doesn't matter. I think what is the key looking at this schedule is that actually one of the softer stretches of the schedule for the Dolphins, if you want to call it that, happens after the bye. You get the Raiders at home coming off of the bye. Then you travel to New York. You travel to Washington. Like after the bye, the Dolphins never leave the Eastern time zone, which is huge.
Well, no, you're right. Because they play Dallas, but it's at home. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. They don't leave the Eastern time zone after the bye, which is huge. And so, it has the potential to be a really good ramp up period for the Dolphins, where this past season, that last stretch of the season was brutal for the Dolphins. This year, it's a little bit, I don't know. And again, we don't really know at this point. It's May. It's the middle of May. Anything can happen. But it does seem like that might be a softer part of the schedule for the Dolphins this year. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because now there are expectations that the Dolphins are going to be one of the best teams in the league. And let me tell you, if the Dolphins somehow finish this season 9-8 and they miss the playoffs, if you come and say to me, it's okay because they had one of the hardest schedules in the NFL, I'm going to throw you through a freaking window. Okay. To quote one of my favorite shows on Netflix, F is for Family. I'm going to put you through a freaking wall. I cleaned it up a little bit. Okay. You don't get to argue that, oh, well, the schedule was too tough. No. You're one of the best teams in the league. You have to win these games, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that if the Dolphins finish 10-7 and sneak into the playoffs, that I'm going to be upset about that. Because as we've seen now with the Florida Panthers and the Miami Heat, and granted, basketball and hockey, two very different games than the NFL. But if you sneak into the playoffs and then make a deep playoff run, it's a different story, right? So if you finish 9-8 or 10-7 and you make it into the playoffs, fantastic. Now go make a deep run, right? Make it to the AFC Championship game. Okay, great. Make it to the Super Bowl. Fine. But I'm not going to be, so I'm not going to be sitting here crying into my cornflakes if the Dolphins finish 9-8, but somehow sneak into the playoffs and then make a miraculous run to the Super Bowl. Would I be disappointed if they didn't win? Sure. But the fact of the matter is the expectation is win, and it doesn't matter what the schedule is. It doesn't matter who the opponents are. The fact is that, quite frankly, given the opponents that the Dolphins had, and we've known who these opponents were going to be since January, the fact is we've known who they were going to be. That knowing who those opponents are and how they've laid out, the Dolphins, I think, have been set up for success as much as they possibly could be in terms of how the schedule lays out. So in terms of deep analysis of the Dolphins' 18-week schedule, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. And truthfully, I mean, you start the season in Los Angeles, and then the only time the rest of the season that you leave the Eastern time zone is the neutral site game in Germany.
Right.
So, I mean, you're not traveling a ton. I think somebody in the comments said that they're not playing anybody, that none of their opponents are playing the Dolphins coming off of a bye week. I haven't checked that, but if that's true, that's a huge win. You're ending, a lot was made about like, oh, well, we only have, one home game in September. And then, we don't get our second home game until like October 8th against the Giants. So we're giving up our home field advantage with the sun at Hard Rock Stadium. And yeah, that's fine. But at the end of the day, I'll gladly give that up to have a bunch of home games at the end of the season, because I'd much rather the important games at the end of the season be played at home than on the road, because we saw how that worked out last year.
Yeah, we sure did. So, as far as the schedule goes, I'm pretty pleased with it. So let's do, how about it, Brain? Let's do some early predictions. Let's go through this. Let's go through, what is the Dolphins schedule record at the end of the season, Brain? Should we go week by week?
I don't want to go week by week yet because, then I'm going to be, then I'm going to have, what's the confirmation bias, or, I'm going to, when I really sit down to make my official prediction at the end of the preseason, then I'm going to feel like, oh, well, I picked them to win this game and that's going to influence my decision. I want to steer clear of that. I think that this team, I just don't see any way, barring, everything went wrong for this team last year from an injury perspective, and they still managed to go 9-8. I think the floor of this team is a 10-win team. I think the ceiling of this team is probably around 13 wins, but I think the realistic expectations is that this is an 11 or 12-win team. And I think that's where we're at. And I think the difference between 11 and 12 wins may very well be the last game of the season against Buffalo. And that may very well be the difference between winning the division and hosting a playoff game and making it in as a wild card. And that may very well be the difference between this team making a deep run or getting eliminated in the first round.
So let's set it up. Coming in, ready? Coming into the final game of the season, week 18, Buffalo Bills are 12-4. The Miami Dolphins are 11-5 and own a victory in Buffalo over the Bills earlier in the season.
Wow.
So we come into the final game of the season, and NBC says, damn the torpedoes. We're putting Bills Dolphins on national TV on Sunday night to close the regular season. And you get Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills coming into Hard Rock Stadium to take on Mike White and the Miami Dolphins in week 18 because Tua was knocked out around week 13 and was unable to complete the season. I'm just kidding. It's Tua's in the game. Tua's healthy. He has miraculously stayed healthy. He's maybe missed a game here or there, but he has largely stayed healthy. He has largely been productive. And you get the Miami Dolphins for it. Basically the AFC East title game at home, week 18. Pretty hot. Pretty hot. I'm getting excited. I don't know. I don't know that that's going to happen. It'd be great though if it did, wouldn't it?
I see that game lining up very similarly to how I don't agree that we're necessarily going to have, won the game in Buffalo earlier in the season.
Oh, come on.
But I think it's very realistic that going into that game ends up being for the division. And if that game is for the division, you want that game to be at home. And if you're really a championship contender, you win that game.
Oh, 100%. You got to. I mean, that is exactly the kind of game that, listen, we've been saying it. It's the kind of game that you long for as an NFL fan, right? And we've been wanting the Dolphins to play in those types of games for a long time. It's the types of game that they used to play in all the time. And it seems lately that they've been getting back to playing those kinds of games again. So that's exciting. I'm excited, Brain. I'm not without a healthy dose of skepticism. But there's a long way to go in this offseason because, Brain, there's also this other rumor that won't go away. And that is that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be cutting Dalvin Cook on June 1st. And that the Dolphins are in there to bring him to town. And as we have said on this show, I don't think either one of us is against the idea of the Dolphins signing Dalvin Cook, but I think both of us are vehemently against the idea of the Dolphins giving up anything of value to trade for him or to take on that contract. So if the Vikings want to cut him and the Dolphins can bring him in on their own terms, fantastic. But I'm not interested in trading for that contract.
Yeah, well, I think definitely you're not trading for him. And then the question is, because you're going to have the cap space with the $10 million freed up after June 1st. We don't know if they're going to ever extend Christian Wilkins. I don't think that that's going to happen. I have a take on that. I don't think that that's going to happen. So I don't think they're going to free up additional cap space there. You could trade Cedric Wilson and free up additional cap space there. But how much do the Dolphins want to pay him? Because the other piece of the puzzle, of course, is, the rollover cap, the cap that you don't spend that'll go towards next year. How much of that do the Dolphins want to save? So we'll see how much do the Dolphins want to save to get Dalvin Cook. How bad does Dalvin Cook want to be down here? Will Dalvin Cook play down here at a pay cut? Because I think that's what it's going to take. It seems and sounds like that may be the case. And if Dalvin Cook wants to come down here, play on a 1-year deal that's a pay cut, and turn down either a 1-year deal or a multi-year deal worth more money to play somewhere else, hey, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think this backfield all of a sudden is a really complete backfield. If you've got Dalvin Cook, Mostert, Josh Wilson, and A-Chain, the only question that I have there is, what if this was your plan all along, why did you spend so many of your resources at that position? But I guess you do what you can, and if things fall into your lap like Dalvin Cook or like Tyreek Hill did, then you do it. But I mean, it'd be exciting. Certainly would be exciting.
It certainly would. And so it's something that I would absolutely be open to. I think it'd be very, very exciting. And it would add another element to this offense that I think could be, just make this team really, really exciting to watch. I think we are in a place where this team could just be a ton of fun to watch this season. And you see that reflected in the fact that they've got 5 nationally televised games to start. And then, of course, there's also flexible scheduling down the line. So there are a lot of other possibilities out there. Of course, speaking of the schedule, there's also now the fact that CBS and Fox can protect games now. So CBS and Fox have the ability. I don't think in week 18 that is the case, but in the other weeks when flexible scheduling starts, CBS and Fox have the ability to say, no, we're holding on to this game in the 425 window and we're not getting rid of it. And we're not letting Sunday Night or ESPN take it, which I think is something that is going to add an interesting dynamic as flex scheduling starts this season, but we'll see how that plays out down the line. Either way, I'm really, really excited to see what this team has to offer this season. It's been a lot of fun so far this offseason. Offseason still has a long way to go, but before you know it, camp is going to be here and we're going to be having those conversations about this team getting ready for the season. So we're going to be quiet for a little bit over here on the Same Old Dolphin Show, but there will still be shows throughout the summer here at dolphinstalk.com as news breaks. And so make sure that you are following us on social media. Again, I'm at Amplified to Rock. He is at Aaron the Brain. The show is at Same Old Dolphins. Follow at Dolphins Talk as well. Visit dolphinstalk.com each and every day. If you haven't done so already and you're still listening, you're still hanging out, watching the show, listening to the show, smash the like button. We appreciate it. Smash the subscribe button so you're notified every time we go live, and make sure that you are visiting dolphinstalk.com each and every day. It is your one-stop shop for all things Miami Dolphins. Brain, any parting words for the people before we get out of here?
Be excited. Don't lose sight of the fact that this team is supposed to be challenging for a championship this year. So if you're excited and you believe that this team is going to win a championship, more power to you. Believe that. Don't waver from that, and don't excuse anything that is less than that. Because at the end of the day, this season really is about being a championship team. And a lot was made out of this Dolphins quote unquote all-in approach, the extending, the restructuring Bradley Chubb, restructuring Teron Armstead, bringing in Jalen Ramsey, the quote unquote win now moves because this team is going all in. Well, I think this team has gone like 80% of the way in. That's kind of where I'm annoyed or skeptical about their approach on the offensive line, because my thought is, well, you could have just extended Christian Wilkins, traded Cedric Wilson, and you free up like $12 to $13 million in cap space. And you could say what you want about overpaying for a tackle, but you basically could have had Mike McGlinchey for that. and you didn't even have to go get Mike McGlinchey. You could have gotten other serviceable, solid starting offensive tackles, offensive guards that would have been upgrades over what you have. And to me, that would have been all in. So right now, I kind of feel like the Dolphins have hedged a little bit. And I think that that's going to come back to bite them. I hope that it doesn't, because if their gamble pays off and the offensive line comes together and this offense is elite and this defense is elite, then this team does really have a chance to be special, and you haven't overpaid in other areas. And that would be amazing. At the end of the day, we all want this team to win. But if you believe that this is a championship team and you're one of the people that are lauding Chris Grier and this organization and Mike McDaniel and saying that everything that this team has done right or done this offseason is right, well, then stick to that and don't excuse anything less than championship contention when push comes to shove.
Yes. Let's go. I love it. I love it. As Dolphin fans, we've suffered a lot over the years, and Dolphin fans, you deserve the best. So don't accept anything less than that. That's going to wrap us up for this episode of the Same Old Dolphin Show. Thank you, as always, for listening, for watching. We appreciate you being part of the family. We'll be back when we need to be this offseason. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. And as always, go Dolphins!
Is Chris Rear? That's the comment. Chris Rear.